Course, we've all been talking and covering what's happening in D.C. And Mike, something you guys have been covering extensively and live now upstairs here at the Fox 10 studios, with President Trump making a big announcement today and kind of speaking and sharing some of the statistics. Can you share a little bit of that as well?
Yeah, so it was a big moment today where President Trump did his news conference, and he is going to be federalizing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. He feels that crime is up in the city. He feels that there's too many homeless around the areas of the Capitol. So he floated this idea last Wednesday. And if you know anything about President Trump and the way he kind of like talks these things out, he kind of floats the idea a little bit, see how it's going to work on the base, see how it's going to work with other people in Congress. It seemed like it worked well, and then boom, we get this announcement that he is going to federalize the
Yeah.
So he's pretty much in charge of the Metropolitan Police Department right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of a big deal when you consider kind of what he's proposing and what he's eventually expected to, kind of carry out there in D.C. Let's go ahead and bring in Luke Garrett. He's an editor at NPR News this morning. And let me give you a little bit. Luke, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Yeah. Celeste, Anita, and Mike, pleasure to be here.
Hello. Good morning.
Is your mic on?
Morning.
We're going to try to work on those mics real quick. 1 second, Luke. Can you guys hear that feedback?
I hear it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Luke, you look good, buddy. Thank you for hanging steady with us. Yes.
I'm here.
I think that your pedigree is very impressive, your background. So let me just give folks at home a little bit of background on you. You work for NPR, you produce live special coverage, and you also report on politics, and you book guests for All Things Considered, Here and Now, Morning Edition. You spent 3 years at WTOP FM in Washington, D.C., where you worked as a producer, podcast host, and reporter. So you know what you're talking about. Yes.
I hope so. Yes, that's right.
What are your thoughts on what's happening in D.C. and what we heard from the president this morning?
So from the White House press briefing room this morning, we heard kind of two major announcements. One, that President Trump will be taking over control of the Metropolitan Police Department. Now, he cited Section 704 of the Home Rule Act. And this basically allows the president, when enacted, to take control of the Metropolitan Police Department, the local city police department. And it allows him to do this for about 30 days unless Congress, lets him extend that time period. And he promised to, root out crime in the district. He also did a second thing, which is order the National Guard, into the city. As president of the United States, he can and has control over the D.C. National Guard, which is very different than other states. In Arizona, there's the Arizona National Guard, and the governor really has control over that, unit, that force. But in the district, it's different. D.C. is not a state, it's a city, it's a district, and the president really has control of the National Guard. So he ordered 800 National Guard members to go into D.C. streets. And already this weekend, as I was reporting, more than 500 federal agents kind of descended into the city. Those are FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshal Service officers deployed on the streets to, limit crime, as the president says, and as he thinks they should.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm looking at some, and I just Googled crime statistics in D.C., and this is district crime data at a glance is what they're saying, according to MPD, and then they have some FBI national incidents. And it looks like homicides down 12%, sex abuse down 50%, violent crime total down 26%. 2024, it was down 35%. So from 2024 to 25, it has gone up. But they're still saying the numbers are trending downward. I guess what numbers do they look at? What numbers do they analyze? And we have definitely heard of crimes taking place in the news, some significant ones, before decisions like this are made.
That's right. There are a lot of stats flying around here, and the ones I'm really looking at are a couple. First, federal crime data show that D.C. violent crime is down to a 30-year low, and violent crime is down 26% when compared to last year. Now, in 2023, D.C. did see a significant increase in violent crime and shootings. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, talked about that yesterday, and she acknowledged that crime was really high, 2 years ago in 2023. And President Trump himself mentioned that 2023 murder rate. and compared it to other cities around the country. But one thing that I thought was interesting about the president's briefing this morning was that he mentioned very personal and specific cases of violence against former members of his administration. He cited this one case that happened last week against 19-year-old Edward Kornstein, who was a former DOJ employee. Kornstein was walking in D.C. or in the early morning of Sunday around 3 a.m., and he was surrounded by a group of juveniles, and he was attacked. President Trump posted a photo of Kornstein, and this is kind of the impetus and the spark that kind of led to a lot of what we're seeing now. This is kind of the beginnings of Trump really expressing his dismay about crime in D.C. specifically, and then threatening to take over the Metropolitan Police Department and the National Guard. And so, in some ways, there's stats being thrown about, but it's also a personal decision, it seems, by the president to kind of take control of what he calls rampant crime, in the district. But the mayor and members of the city council would say, hey, we think we're doing okay. We have driven down crime in 2 years. We put a lot of effort into that. So there's definitely dispute, between the president and local officials here in D.C.
And where do we see this maybe going? If it's successful, if we see a dip even in more of these cases of homicides, burglaries, theft, can it bleed over into other cities then, and to beef up maybe federal security at, bringing the National Guard in other major cities?
And to that point, if I may, they're actually in court, I believe, today in Los Angeles. That situation a little different, obviously, because we had major protests and riots and violence. Right. But that's an excellent question. Is again, does it bleed into other cities?
Luke, can you answer that question? Do you believe that maybe this could bleed over into other communities nearby?
We'll have to wait and see. And President Trump, from the briefing room at the White House, did basically say and tell other cities to watch. He mentioned 3 major U.S. cities, Chicago, New York, and Oakland, as one that he wants to basically warn with this action of sending in the National Guard and taking control of, the city police department. But it's worth noting, Chicago, New York, and Oakland, they're not D.C. D.C., again, is not a state. It's not within a state. It's its own little district. And the president has levers that he can pull that he can't pull in other cities. So we're going to have to wait and see, if this National Guard deployment, that we're seeing in D.C., that we just saw in Los Angeles, will spread across the country. But it's clear that the president wants other cities to be watching, and this is some sort of message to them in what he hopes to do in the future.
Luke, we have a lot of numbers, statistics, and things like that. Have you heard any, other than the one story that the president shared, any other instances where people have encountered danger or been mugged or carjacked or anything like that on the streets of D.C.?
Sure. I mean, D.C. is a major U.S. city, much like Phoenix, much like all major cities in the United States. There is crime. There is murder, unfortunately. There are carjackings. And D.C. is not separate, in that fact. They have faced crime. And what's unique about D.C., again, is, it's a place where there's local enforcement, but there's also the FBI is based here. Firearms and tobacco officers are here. It's this mix of many different police agencies. And then you factor into that also Maryland and Virginia, which are just, stone throws away from the district in many areas. So it's a pretty, complex law enforcement environment. And when I was a local reporter for WTOP News, we bumped into that a lot when, crimes crossed borders maybe once, twice, 3 times, just in the span of one night, and so, I think we'll have to see how the U.S. National or the D.C. National Guard is used, how Metropolitan Police changes, or if it changes at all, under the directive of Trump, Attorney General Pam Bondi. It's going to be a wait and see for us reporters to see what really does happen, if crime does go down, if it goes up. It's a wait and see approach.
One more question, if you don't mind. Is this an opportunity for state leaders like Muriel Bowser to sit down now with President Trump and have a discussion as to which way they want to patrol and keep the city safe and curb the violence even further? So perhaps this plan doesn't go into place. An opportunity for everyone to have a healthy discussion about how to move forward safely?
Well, I think what this press conference this morning showed is that it's beyond the point of having a sit-down conversation. The president has ordered 800 National Guard troops into D.C. He has taken control of the Metropolitan Police Department under, Section 740 of the Home Rule Act. Action has been taken. Now, Mayor Muriel Bowser was on a Sunday show yesterday and said, look, there are places where the president and I can work together on repairing streets, repairing potholes, fixing fountains, making our parks, more beautiful. And the DC Mayor Muriel Bowser's top, campaign issue in the last campaign was safety and was beating back crime. But the devil's going to be in the details, to borrow, a phrase here. How is the National Guard used? Mayor Muriel Bowser yesterday basically, told residents to keep an eye on these, federal officers and whether they stay within their constitutional limits. And so we're going to see how those lines are drawn and if lines are crossed in this federal, takeover of the Metropolitan Police Department and, National Guard troops kind of descending on D.C.
All right, Luke Garrett from NPR. Luke, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. I love that you majored in physics and philosophy at USD.
Yeah. I ended up in news.
Yeah, look at you now.
Yeah. All right, great.
Right.
Appreciate
Thanks
it. I hope we can have you
thank
back.
you.
You're
Take care.
amazing.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
info there.